Hello, people of the internet. This is Kaiju Noir, and welcome to another episode of the Shoe Watch Podcast. Here with me are my usual sidekicks, David Joshua Hernandez, aka Gorizard.
Greetings, pests.
And Adam Noyce of Adam Noyce Productions.
Hello.
And our guests for this evening, or whatever time of the day you are watching this particular episode, we have two guests that we had before, but I'll get into that later. Returning to the podcast is Christopher Martinez, the artist of the kaiju comic Night of the Fire Beast.
Skria!
and his partner in crime, the writer of Night of the Fire Beast, Jonathan Claude.
Hello, Skria.
So, thank you guys for showing up. So I'd like to explain to the audience that a couple months ago, probably I think in late July or early August, we had this, we recorded a previous episode where we had these two fine, talented individuals on our show, and being the complete dumbass that I am, I ended up losing that audio. And so for the last couple of months, we've been trying to get these two guys together in order to have a chance to re-record this episode. And so after many trials and tribulations, the planets have aligned, and we finally have all five of us individuals here in the same Skype room, ready to give you one hell of a podcast.
It's kind of a good thing we're re-recording this, because when we did the first recording, I was asking questions not regarding the comic because I haven't read it by that point. Instead, I was asking questions about comic book writing and illustration in general.
Mm-hmm. Or
that's still okay.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. So yes, I guess the best way to start this out is, well, I just want to be on say this on recording. Just Chris, John, I heavily apologize once again for losing the original audio, but thank you so much for giving us the time of the day to be here once again on the show.
Oh, anytime.
Anytime. If it was anyone other than you, Andres, we'd have just ignored them, but it's you, so we'll come back again and again.
Thanks, I'm glad.
I'm just doing it so I can hear your lovely voice.
Oh, why, thank you very much.
That's kind of what I was getting at, but I didn't want to say it, but you just said it.
So, I guess the first thing I'd like to ask, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves for those who don't know about you guys and your work?
John, go ahead.
Okay. I'm a comic book writer from Cardiff in Wales in the UK. I've been writing comics for about 4 years now, sort of more seriously in the last 2 or 3. The main thing I suppose I've not been known for, but the main thing I've done was a World War I anthology called To End All Wars, which was lucky enough to be nominated for a couple of Eisners, and that's how I got to know Chris, was through doing that, because he did a story in that book. And yeah, that's it really. Comics, writing comics, that's one of my thing, that's what I do.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much the same thing except drawing more than writing.
Mm-hmm. And so I know you guys met John mentioned how you guys met through through To End All Wars. Would like to get into that comic since we did that in the previous recording. John, how did To End your World War I anthology comic To End All Wars? How did that come about?
It came about because I went to Normandy a couple of years back to see all the D-Day sites and the beaches and things like that. And I was looking at the bookshop in their big war memorial in a place called Caen in Normandy. And it was full of graphic novels about World War II. And I came home and there were announcements about the plans for the centenary of the First World War, which was last summer. And it sort of struck me that I knew a lot about World War II and very little about World War I. And it also struck me that the angle that our government here in Britain take in regards to quote unquote celebrating the First World War and what happened is quite pro-war and quite sort of very it doesn't really give you a taste of what really happened, and it's more angled towards making it look like it was all about stoic self-sacrifice and not the actual kind of mass murder that it was. So yeah, to cut a long story short, I basically sort of came up with the idea that it might be a cool idea to do a World War One anthology because there were so few comics that are of note about World War One. The most famous ones are a couple of French ones by Jacques Tardy, and then Charlie's War by Pat Mills, who's one of the founders of 2000 AD.
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically it, really.
And so I guess you wanted to do like a project that really got into the whole nitty-gritty details that went on during that war, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the idea was I got a guy who I knew vaguely from doing other British comics, a fella called Brick. He got involved with it really early on to help me edit the book because I didn't know anything about editing a book, or, never done it before in my life. Mm-hmm. And what we decided between us was that the angle we had to come from was to try and show facets of World War One that people wouldn't ordinarily know about. So everybody knows the typical images of soldiers in the trenches, and they know the Somme and a few other battles. But we wanted to show it from the point of view of, how it affected soldiers from both sides, not just the French and the Americans and the British and the quote-unquote good guys, but show how the Germans felt, show how women were how women were involved in the First World War, how big a deal it was for animals, and just show like every facet of the First World War that we could reasonably fit into a book.
Mm-hmm. And how did you went about in terms of finding the writers and artists to supply their talents to your to this project of yours, and how did you go about getting the research in order to get that historical accuracy involved in your book?
And initially, I put out adverts on different websites. Some of it was like people that I already had contacts with, or Brick already had contacts with. Like Chris was one of the first people to answer the ad that I put on. I think it was Pencil Jack.
Yeah.
And then basically what we did was we asked all the people that were interested to pitch us 2 sort of 1-paragraph ideas for what they wanted to tell their stories about. And then as time went on and we started to accept more ideas, we started to then try and like guide people to stories that we wanted covered. So once we had, say, like, because there's 26 stories in the book. So once we got to the point where we had like maybe 15, 18 stories, there were certain beats we wanted to hit. Topics we wanted to cover. So when people came on board, we would say, well, could you pitch us a story about, this subject, for example, or could you pitch us a subject about how the media dealt with the First World War, or how like women at home had to deal with their sons and their husbands going off to fight and things like that. Mm-hmm. And sorry, and then just I was going to say, like, research was just a question of finding as much as you can from as many angles as you can and trying to ignore what was like, not ignore, but there's a very kind of prevalent establishment view of the First World War that the media, particularly the BBC media and our government, put out around that time in the build-up. There was a lot of stuff on TV, a lot of documentaries, a lot of retrospectives, and obviously there not being any surviving combatants left to tell us what it was like. It's very easy to then, portray things how you want them to make it look like it was a very just and noble cause, which, in my opinion, and the opinions of most of the people, if not all of the people I would think involved in our book, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask something real quick. When someone asks you to pitch something, how would you go about pitching it to that person? Like, let's say if someone asked you to pitch Night of the Fire Beast.
How do you go about a comic pitch, do you mean?
Yeah, or pitching in general, because I kind of have like a vague understanding of how one pitches something, whether it's a movie, a TV show, or a comic book. I just want to get a sense of like the overall direction.
I think for me, I think having done it a few times and having asked people to do it a couple of times, I suppose it's about getting across why your story is interesting and why it's good in as few words as possible, and then go from there. Because whoever you pitch to, whether they're like Marvel, DC, or just a little indie publisher, time is not exactly something they've got in abundance. So they want to hear you tell them why your story is super cool and worthy of their time in as little time as possible. What do you think, Chris? Is that fair?
Yeah, and it also, it kind of depends on what company you're pitching to specifically. Different companies, like, there's general guidelines, but different companies want different specific things for a pitch.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
so
I know...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
No, okay. Well, I was going to ask if any of you were ever asked to write a treatment before writing a full script for a comic, or they don't do that in the comic industry.
No, not exactly. I've been asked to like I've asked I've been given like a green light to do something, but then been asked to flesh it out before it turns into a script. If that makes sense.
Oh
yeah.
So kind of like a summary.
Yeah. So like there's like a lot of publishers will ask you for a synopsis, which would be like kind of the thing that they'll probably then go and use in like when they're soliciting it in different magazines and stuff, so you know what the thing is about, which is the kind of like the thing that you pitch to the consumer, and then there's the breakdown of the story, which is the beginning, middle, and an end for the publisher, so they can go like, they can see quickly that your story flows, that it's got structure, that it or not. So yeah, that tends to be how they want it done. When we've pitched, like when we're pitching Fire Beast and stuff, there's like a little synopsis that basically is the kind of like back of the DVD, if you will, and then there's the actual breakdown of the story for the publisher to read.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like David and Adam, do you guys remember when the whole Colossal debacle occurred a couple months back, where somebody, like some studio, not some studio, but some people, group of filmmakers, they wanted to pitch that Anne Hathaway giant monster movie, and we saw those like pages that had like brief plot synopses and summaries, and basically a rundown of like what the story to this movie was. And I guess the whole reason why that whole thing turned into a controversy was because they just so happened to name their monster Godzilla as like a placeholder name.
Which is the stupidest goddamn thing I've ever heard, by the way.
Yeah.
That was super stupid. Like, I don't know how you could be so completely blind to, like, the fandom. Like, I could understand, like, you maybe not knowing that it was as huge as it was, but but still, that's like pitching a superhero thing and calling it the Fantastic Four. And nobody's going to notice.
I don't even know what the Fantastic Four is anymore. All I know is Fan Four Stick.
Yeah, nobody wants to pitch Fantastic Four anymore.
Except Tommy Wiseau, and I'm okay with that.
I suppose it will have some level of entertainment that the new movie didn't.
Yeah, it'd be like Roger Corman all over again. I am perfectly okay with that. Let Tommy Wiseau make his Fantastic Four movie, just please. Just give us something other than Fan Four Stick.
Drew, I know, like, I just want to make one little comment about the Colossal, where it's like, yeah, it was really stupid that they added Godzilla's name unaware. I guess maybe they thought that Godzilla was kind of like Frankenstein, where it's just this public domain name that they're able to use. But again, that's stupid.
That's the funniest thing I've heard all day.
Although it's like, really, Warner Brothers owns the rights to, make that movie last year that you're obviously trying to work off of its success. But it's like, it's one thing to have Godzilla, but then to put Mazinger Z on the poster, it's like, that's a character that belongs to somebody.
You know what?
And why Mazinger Z?
Oh, because he's like one of the most popular giant robots in fiction.
But I'm surprised you didn't go with like a Zord or some shit.
Or like Pacific Rim or something.
Yeah.
Well, no, because they probably figured, Godzilla is just those cheesy 60 movies, and this cartoon, no one's ever heard of that, outside of Japan.
I know I have.
I guess so, I suppose.
I still want to see that movie made, though.
Colossal? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm still going to
I could think of a better monster movie that needs to be made.
Night of the Fire Beast?
Well, I didn't say that, but,
I'm not saying it, but if you think so.
No, I don't even like Night of the Fire Beast.
Well,
Right.
that movie made in like what 1959 by that no talent director.
Yeah.
Hack Williamson.
Yeah, who wants to see a remake of that, let alone a comic book based off of it?
I know. God.
If there was a camera, I'd be slowly looking towards it.
Not to mention, have to make a comic of said movie.
I'd be pulling a red letter media and slowly drinking my beer.
While doing a very awkward, slow close-up of your face.
Yeah.
Is there
I
any
love-
such thing as a not awkward, slow close-up?
that is very true. So anyways, I did want to ask, of all the people that you worked with, Jonathan, when it came to End All Wars, why do you think that you and Chris got along so well more than with other people?
I think with back and forth conversations, we just seem to have like similar tastes in lots of different things and just similar kind of attitude to how comics worked or shouldn't work. I mean, like I didn't literally edit the story that Chris worked on as much as Brick, my co-editor, did, but we just kind of kept in touch. And I think because Chris was one of the first people to come on board as well, you know, the first few people that came on board, you'd kind of strike up good sort of relationships with, because you were like really happy to have them on board. But I think it was like nice that people came on board really early, were there purely because they were interested in the idea. It wasn't like, oh, I've heard this from someone else and I know this is getting published, or you know, not that I'm saying anyone was like that, but...
I'll be right back.
All right. Sorry, continue, John.
No, just that was it really.
Yeah, I think like we hit it off through the editing and whatnot, which I don't think like they really had to do a lot of stuff with what I did, because they gave me specific direction, because I didn't write the story that I drew. And John and Brick basically said, well, we have this story and it's kind of similar to what you pitched, but we just kind of want you to make it look as good as you can. So, and I also never really argued, and anything that I did change from the story made sense.
And sorry, go ahead.
John might argue that. I don't know.
No, I can say with absolute honesty that Chris was like no problem during the whole course of doing that book, because we did have a few problems with a few people. I mean, there were 53 people that me and Brick were juggling between us, sometimes literally. And Chris was he was a pro.
So when you mentioned over like 50 people working on this comic, so I'm assuming, like you mentioned, it was like around like 25, 26 stories. So you had like
26, yeah.
26. So did you have like 26 writers and 26 artists?
Not exactly. Some of them were written and drawn by the same person, but the majority were or some people wrote more than one story, like I did too. Brick did one under a different name and also one under his name. So there were a few, but So more often than not, it was a writer and an artist for each story.
Wow. So throughout that long process, what do you think was the best thing that occurred? What was the best thing about the creation process, and what was the most difficult thing that came when it came to working on bringing that comic to fruition?
I would say, I mean, the best thing, it is difficult to say because there were so many best things. Like for me, the best thing was just all of the different friendships and relationships that I got out of making the book. I mean, I got to know some wicked people. Obviously, if I hadn't done that book, I wouldn't be doing this podcast now. I wouldn't have got to know Chris, wouldn't have done Fire Beast, wouldn't have come to Chicago. One of the guys who's working on a graphic novel I'm writing now wouldn't know him otherwise. Like me and Brick have got a good relationship. I mean, that was amazing. The fact that, it went from it was a little idea that sort of snowballed into something much bigger, and we had quite a lot of, we were in one of the national newspapers over here. We got to do things at some comic festivals and stuff like that, and I got to go to different bookshops and libraries and do talks on it and things, things that you don't expect you're going to get to do off the back of an idea. And obviously, it getting nominated for 2 Eisners was a bit ridiculous. Nobody sort of saw that coming.
it quadrupled our page rate.
Indeed, it did. Yeah. We now charge £8 a page.
And the Eisner Awards, for people who do not know, if I'm correct, the Eisner Award is like the highest acclamation or like the highest award given in terms of the comic book industry. Kind of like, or you would say like they're kind of like the Emmys. They are to comics as like Emmys are to television, and like the Oscars are to films.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it's like, how did it feel? Like how were you even notified that you were double nominated?
I was sitting in the pub with my mate of an afternoon, and I got a Twitter notification from the publisher, Soaring Penguin, to say To End All was nominated for 2 Eisners, and I literally just replied, going, "Shut up! Don't be ridiculous." I thought I'd misread it or something, and then I looked, and there was a link to all the nominations, and it was on there for best anthology and best reality-based comics. So you know. We must have all done something right. And that's the thing. I mean, like you said about what was good about it, but what one of the great things about it was seeing all these people for free, I might add, because nobody got paid for it. All the money that, because there were so many people involved, and because of the nature of the subject, we decided that all of the proceeds, all the profits, I should say, would go to Médecins Sans Frontières, which is a charity that helps give medical aid to like war-torn countries and stuff. So everybody did it for free, but like the effort that everybody put in and the amount of work everybody put in, and it was such a high standard. And some of these people were established comic, professionals, and some people were doing their first comic strip or their first comic script, and everybody was in there together. And I think, it was kind of testament to what you can do off the back of a decent idea if you kind of leave your ego at the door and just do it for the sake of the idea.
I have a hard time with that.
Well, yeah, we all struggle from it on occasion, but
My ego.
When it comes to, let's see, I remember the last time we recorded this, you mentioned how I believe it was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the creator of Judge Dredd himself wrote like a prologue for your book, or like an opening essay.
Yeah, Pat Mills did the introduction. He was the guy I mentioned earlier who did Charlie's War, which is the sort of one of the most well-known World War One comics. It was a strip that featured in a comic called Battle in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was one of the first, at the time when all like war comics were very gung-ho and, about heroism. This one was about a young sort of 16-year-old kid who pretended he was 18 and signed up to fight in the First World War and went through hell. But it was still in a comic that was for, 14-year-old kids or whatever. And a guy who runs a comic website called Down the Tubes and has published comics, a chap called John Freeman, he put me in touch with Pat Mills really early on as a kind of like, almost like a kind of guiding light, if you will. And he just sort of like gave us the thumbs up with what we were planning to do and offered to write the introduction. And he's been really cool, like mentioning it on like podcasts he's been on and interviews and stuff, because I think he's very passionate about seeing more resonant issues dealt with in comics, especially about things that have happened in the world in relation to conflict than necessarily is out there at the moment. So that was pretty awesome.
And that like, to be able to meet someone like as like well known as that must have been like a huge honor for someone to just like, in a way, sort of like provide his greatness upon your comic.
Yeah, I've never actually met him. I've just spoken to him in emails. Weirdly, I got a book signed by him at a talk about 5 years ago before I did this book, but I never actually met him during the process. But, he was always really cool whenever I emailed him, and, he'd get back to me really quickly. And, it's that thing where you sometimes have to stop and think, God, I'm talking to like, comics royalty here. And then he's just another dude, and he's like super cool and really, that's what's nice about the experience of working in comics, which is also what can be not nice about it, is that I don't know, I just think it's one of those mediums that doesn't really lend itself to having an ego, because the whole thing that's beautiful about it is that you don't have to be part of the thing that people take home and read. You're kind of completely divorced from it, so I quite like that about it.
And you would think that, but then there's a whole bunch of dicks too.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, that would, because that's what you'd think. When, like, I think the fact that, you know, if you're in a band or you're in a film or you're in a play or whatever, your face gets to be part of it at some point. So I think certain comic writers or artists overcompensate them when they get to the convention circuit and the such, and go all rock star.
Oh yeah, like I assume like when it comes to like comic books in particular, you definitely, well, you know, like when it comes to a lot of all different kinds of media, it's all a collaborative effort. And does it feel like, how do you think like comic books, how do you think it feels like to work on a comic book and work with fellow collaborators? How do you think that would differ from, say, collaborating with other people on a movie or a TV show? Like, what do you think, like, the process of working with other people on a comic book makes it more unique than other mediums?
After you, Chris?
I think comics are more direct. Like, you know, if you're doing a film, you basically can't do a film by yourself, or even with two people. It's almost impossible unless your subject lends itself to just two people and a camera. But with comics, you know, John and I did the entire Fire Beast book ourselves. We didn't have anyone else except for the cover and the pinups, but, you know, the actual story was just two people. So, like, you can deal directly with the person you're working with, you know, on a regular basis, whereas if you're, like, putting together even a small, low-budget film, you know, the number of people that you're working with, you might not necessarily talk to people who are on your film. As I was saying, like, even on a small movie, like a tiny independent kind of film, you know, there's so many people that need to be involved that even if it's your film, you might not actually talk to the guy who's doing, like, lighting somewhere on a scene that you're not involved in. Yeah, so, like, there's more delegation, I think, with film than comics specifically.
And
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. And I did want to ask, before I go into the questions regarding the Fire Beast, what was it what was the thing that got you both into comic books in the first place? Like, what were the things that inspired you to choose this particular career, and what was the things that, like, said, yes, I definitely, like, what was, like, the comic that made you go, yes, I want to do this for a living?
John?
For me, it was, well, I remember being really little and having this book of black and white reprints of Superman and Batman comics. I'd always kind of really liked comics. And then when I was, I don't know, I must have been about 12 maybe, my grandmother took me to a comic shop in Cardiff, because I didn't live here when I was a kid. And she gave me, like, some money to spend, and I came away with some Tales from the Crypt reprints and one of the original, like, Eastman and Laird Ninja Turtles books. Yeah, I was just hooked, and then I really got into, like, horror comics initially, and then sort of onto superhero stuff. And then I didn't read any for probably about 10 years, and then I got back into them in my sort of mid-20s. 10 years is a bit of a stretch, actually, probably more like 5 or 6, but I got back into comics at about the same time that I was getting into the idea of writing. But at first I just used to write, like, short stories, and I wanted to write plays and stuff. And as I got more and more back into comics, I suddenly sort of clicked, well, why don't you try and write the thing that you actually love the most, you know? So so I had to go.
And as for you, Chris?
I remember as far back as I can remember, like, reading comics, and actually the first stuff I read was, like, Sergeant Rock and Haunted Tank and all the cheesy DC war comics. And then, like, got into various other stuff, but I've just always, you know, drawn, so that's kind of the direction it went. Not so much as anything made me do it, as I kind of had to do it.
And I remember, like, in terms of, like, what were, like, the inspirations in terms of, like, your own personal styles. And I know in the last time you were on this show, Chris, you mentioned how Mike Mignola was a big influence on your art style.
Yes. Mignola's a big one. He's kind of trendy to say still, but Alex Toth, Al Williamson was one of the main ones. So yeah, like a weird combination of realistic and stylized, but those are the main guys.
And what would you say were some of your biggest influences in terms of your writing, John?
Not really anything I can sort of single out particularly in terms of comics, but I always loved reading sort of more biographical writing and things that were like my favorite writer was always Hunter S. Thompson, and I liked reading like a lot of his work. I liked reading William Burroughs, and I like reading like old kind of like combat memoirs and stuff. So I think when I started to sort of look at comics from a point of view of sort of studying the sort of craft of them a little bit, I kind of gravitated to a lot of these kind of like what you might call like graphic memoirs and stuff like that. So a lot of my writing tends to have, you know, it can be quite caption heavy, or it's quite, you know, first person and people, you know, thinking about what they're doing while they're doing it. And I think I kind of like lean towards that a little bit from being influenced by reading people who write about their own lives.
Mm-hmm. And so, what would you say? How would you guys like to explain how the Night of the Fire Beast project came about?
Chris, you go, son.
Oh, okay. Well, it came about because my boss was on vacation one week at my day job.
I like the story already.
And I had it in my head to come up with a giant monster comic concept, because I'm not generally happy with a lot of the kaiju comics that have been out recently.
Uh-huh.
And I want to do something kind of retro.
Yeah.
So I took stole time here and there and basically laid out the entire initial idea at work. And at first it wasn't a fake movie. It was just kind of a basic giant monster story based on something like there's a lot of Lovecraft initially with the island. I think they still came through. But it kind of evolved into the movie concept later on. And then I'm not much of a writer on my own, but I can plot things and I, direct ideas. So then I ended up mentioning it to John.
Mm-hmm.
And John, I specifically went to someone like John because he was not familiar with monster movies, or giant monster movies anyway. And I wanted it to have that kind of Gorgo, kind of UK flavor, not necessarily all overt horror kind of stuff, but the general idea, and flavor with Gorgo. So, and that's where he came in, and he just took it and ran with it and made it way better, like characterization wise and detail wise. So he made it what it is from my basic idea.
Mm-hmm. And John, how did you felt when you were approached by Chris to work on this project, despite your, for lack of a better term, limited experience with giant monster films in general?
Yeah, because I mean, it was limited as opposed to non-existent. I mean, I'd seen like the original Godzilla, and I'd seen a couple of Godzilla films like Mothra and stuff like that, but I wasn't, well versed in it by any stretch of the imagination. But no, I just thought it was an awesome idea. I mean, it is still I still every time I look at it or tell someone about it, you can see their cogs going in their brain as they just realize how much of a cool idea it is. The sort of film isn't really a film. And yeah, just, the idea of writing, I think for me as well, not only was it, it was a great idea and I would have said yes in a heartbeat anyway, but having spent the better part of 18 months working on, dead soldiers in mud and, lots of terrible things happening to people doing a World War I book to suddenly do some nice, not light-hearted, but it was a perfect kind of antidote to everything I'd been working on.
Like more of an escapist fantasy as opposed to something more grounded in reality.
Yeah, but saying that, we still had to squeeze a little bit of a World War One flashback in there,
Yeah.
just to keep ourselves
I
sane.
noticed that.
But
Like a
I
little,
noticed.
like a little ghost of To End All Wars just snuck in there.
well, that was just
Yeah.
a joke. Like we said to one of us said to the other, we should do. Or I think Chris said to me as a joke, we should do a World War One flashback. And I was like, yeah, ha ha ha. And then I sort of thought and was like, actually, that could work. And yeah, hopefully it did.
I did want to know, where did the idea came from where in this fictional film that World War II flashback was supposedly an animated sequence? Because I don't recall any film from the 50s that ever tried having an animated sequence in the middle of their film. Like, I know there's maybe like movies like Phantom of the Opera that had a color sequence, but yeah, where did that came from with the whole animated flashback?
Well,
German expressionism.
yeah, because the artist that penciled that, Neil, who was also on To End All Wars, his style is really cartoony, so kind of to explain the change in styles for the flashback,
Mm-hmm.
we made it as though the director decided to do something really goofy like that.
Mm.
And, you know, within the meta story, I think it works okay.
And so what came first, the idea to do an animated flashback or the artist that you brought along?
The artist.
Okay, and what made you decide to bring in a guest artist for that one particular sequence?
One, because I wanted to make it, make it look like something different. You know, it was a flashback, so I didn't want it to just be like my art with like wonky looking borders.
Mm-hmm. To like make it look more distinct, to let people know that this is something that's like displaced in time.
Right. And then when he did the pencils for it, it was pretty cartoony, so it kind of worked to separate it. And given the style that he used, I thought it might be cool to just say it was an animated sequence.
Mm-hmm. And the whole angle that this is more than just a comic, but rather this is like a comic interpretation of a 50s monster movie. Where did that idea initially come from?
My brain. From me, like, basically zoning out at work and coming up with really strange ideas. That's totally what it was. Nothing like fancy and artistic or deep. It's just, and also because I don't think I've ever seen anyone do something like that. It kind of explains away why it's basically a stereotypical cliche monster movie, because it's supposed to be. And I guess on top of that, like, one of the things that I haven't really seen from any of the kaiju comics that have been put out recently is that none of them at all seem like a kaiju movie.
I guess so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the people who work on the current kaiju stuff, and they all do a really good job, but it all seems like the people who do the stories almost have an attitude like they can, those movies were cool, but we can make it something more. And I don't think fans necessarily want to see something more all the time. They want to pick up a comic
that looks like something that they're familiar with.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be like high literature or anything, just something, maybe even a nostalgic kind of feel. So I wanted to do something more like that. And it kind of mutated into not being like a movie, but literally being a movie.
In paper form.
Yeah. Or I mean, even like the idea is that it was an actual movie, and we still get people asking us where they can see clips of the film.
Yeah.
They can't.
Maybe like some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to ask, because this is what I kind of like got off from the comic reading it today. Is it essentially the comic, I mean, kind of like an adaptation of the film? Like if it was a movie?
No, it literally is the film.
Oh.
Yeah, when you
Logic
read the
there.
comic, it's supposed to be as though you were watching the film.
But as a comic, right?
Not technically.
It's like you're watching the movie unfold before your eyes, but the movie just so happens to be in comic form.
Oh,
Right.
because when I got off, what I got off initially from it is that I thought that it was probably in a fictional universe that apparently in that little movie fact thing on the second page, it says the film was lost for a certain amount of time. So I assumed that the comic was an
Like,
adaptation of the lost film.
Well, I mean, the overall perception is basically going to be that, and I'm not sure if the actual, like, you're watching the movie instead of reading the comic would necessarily come through unless you asked one of us. But, that's what it was intended to be, is it's as though you're watching the newly released restored Blu-ray of this movie.
Oh,
Criterion Collection just released Night of the Fire Beast on Blu-ray. I need to see this movie, and it's.
I would love to do, like, once all 3 of the books are done, like, do some sort of boxed set that looks like a DVD boxed set.
Yes.
Or be awesome.
Yes, that would be.
I don't think anyone's going to spend the money on that, but
I would.
Kickstarter.
Or maybe you could just send me the box, and at that point I'll probably have all 3 issues.
yeah. And then what else? Any other extras? Like John wrote a
China.
Christmas story that we're going to try and get out by Christmas.
Yeah. Like a
And,
Christmas story, as in like a Fire Beast Christmas special of some sort.
What was it,
It's
John?
called
It
the
was-
night. It's the night brackets before Christmas, close brackets of the Fire Beast.
Or it's like
I-
what was it called? Like Dorogon Saves Christmas.
Oh no, it's literally called the night before Christmas of the Fire Beast. I wrote it this very day.
Nice.
It all rhymes too. Read some.
It all rhymes. Do you want the opening line?
Yes.
Okay, let me just find it. I'll do you. This is an exclusive for you here of the night before Christmas of the Fire Beast.
Which you can only hear. You can only listen
You can-
here on
you can-
Shoe Watch.
Only listen here. Yeah, this is a one-time only deal. It's going to be. I'm not doing the whole thing because it'll spoil it.
Right.
but
And people
you
won't
can have,
pay
you
you
can have
for it.
you can have the first 2 lines. So, 'twas the night before Christmas, and in the dark depths below, a creature was stirring, his fierce eyes aglow. Through the ocean he sensed the panic and fear. What dread had befallen this time of good cheer?
I love it.
That's all you're getting. There's 10 more like that.
Excellent.
Oh, and the thing was, like, I was actually at work, and he's like, what if we do a Christmas story? And he sent me that line in text, and, like, just off the top of his head.
I wish I can rhyme like that.
I
You can,
have
Andres.
no
You
rhyming
can.
skills.
You just have to believe in yourself, Andres.
And then maybe the spirit of Christmas will bestow me the gift of writing.
It's the spirit of Dorogan. That's what it is. I'm
Yes.
channeling him.
We
The
believe in
feats I've been
Dorogon.
taking since I did this
The
comic
instinct
is
of
incredible.
Red Bull and coffee and booze.
So, I did want to ask, when it came to drawing and writing for this comic, you guys mentioned how you want to give it that 1950s monster movie throwback, and yet, like, from my own perspective, I noticed that the quality of the art and the quality of the writing exceeded the standards set by those movies of the 50s. So I'm wondering, where did you guys drew the line between trying to be faithful to that 50s style and then trying to give it that more modern style of writing and artistry?
Oh, that's a
Well,
tricky one.
for as far as my art goes, I didn't really give any consideration to making it more of a 50s style comic
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to make it realistic because it was supposed to be a film. And going back now, I realize I should have taken more liberties with the quote unquote sets.
Uh-huh.
I spent, after watching like every Cinema Sins in one sitting, I realized that I should have more fake mistakes
Mm-hmm.
in that movie than I did. And But so like the actual art style, there was no consideration of
Well,
making it look like an old comic
Well,
because
not sorry, sorry if I didn't put it clearly, but like I didn't meant like by art style, but I meant like you made the environments and the creatures look more real than they would have looked like if this was an actual movie. That's what I meant to say. Like you mentioned how you.
Oh yeah, and,
yeah, you mentioned how
that
you.
was kind of
Uh-huh. Sorry, go ahead.
it was an interesting to balance because at one time on one hand you want to make it look cool because
Mhm.
you're drawing it and you
Yeah.
want the drawings to look cool and kind of balance that with making it look cheesy because you don't want people to think that it was cheesy because you can't draw.
Mm-hmm.
So like the monsters looked probably better than they would have if it were an actual film,
Mm-hmm.
which, I still like the way they look, but, had I been faithful to my concept more, they would have looked really crappy.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to make sure they looked cool so someone wouldn't misinterpret it as bad art as opposed to like good art with of a bad movie.
Right.
If that
Yeah, totally. And that's for you, John?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a question of like thinking that you want to channel all of the things from that period that you love. So for me, it was thinking about Hammer horror movies and Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that. But also, like, kind of touching on what Chris was saying then, like, I don't think, like, a lot of those 50s films or comics or whatever they might be, however bad they might seem to us, they weren't at the time trying to make a piece of shit. They were actually working really hard to make the best thing that they could in most of those instances.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think all of them were constantly trying to be bad. So you've got to try and do the same thing when you're trying to recreate that vibe. Like something has a 50s vibe or an 80s vibe because of the time it was made, obviously, but also because of how people were at the time they were trying to make it. So you've got to, I think you've got to try and take it seriously, but have a healthy sense of reverence for what made that period, put out the kind of films and the kind of books and the kind of TV shows and comics or whatever that it did.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that may have been like the most difficult thing about when it comes to the execution of Night of the Fire Beast, being able to obtain that reverence for the older style, but at the same time making it a really good product and the good looking and well written product in the end?
Well, I think
Yeah.
like when Chris said earlier about the some of the modern like kaiju comics, like when Chris asked me to write the story, I bought and read quite a few kaiju comics like off the shelf and bought a couple of like trades and stuff, and I watched quite a handful of movies. And the one thing that the movies had that the comics lacked was that sense of reverence.
Mm-hmm.
So I just I wasn't like I was sitting at my computer going must be reverential to the subject matter, but it was something I was conscious of, certainly.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned how you were looking for certain kaiju comics for reference, I certainly hope you weren't reading Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters.
No, I read, what did I read? I read Godzilla Half Century War that I really liked.
Yes, that I would think
Yeah.
that's the best. Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Why would you want to read any Godzilla comic? They're all crap.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I love Half Century War.
They're all garbage.
How many
Yeah,
have you
I
actually
was
read,
gonna ask
Adam?
I mean,
Half Century War was good.
Yes.
That was it.
Half Century War is worth buying just for the art, even if you'd ignore the story. That's worth having on your shelf for the art alone. But and I read a few of the one shots that they'd done with like Anguirus and a couple of other characters like Hedorah, stuff like that.
Yeah, the Godzilla Legends miniseries.
Yeah, and to be honest, I do think as well that like it makes sense to publish a Godzilla comic because he's such a huge character, but it doesn't necessarily work because it's a character that lends itself to visual storytelling. Like Night of the Fire Beast works because it's got it's the metafictional premise and the fact that it has these very specific sort of styles that each issue is going to have is what makes it work. I don't think you could I don't want to break Chris's heart or anything, but I don't think you'd be wanting to do like 100 issues of Fire Beast comics, because I think you'd run out of things you could do with it, and I think that's where that's why they now have to do comics where Godzilla has to go to hell, because there's only so many things you can do with that character without putting him on screen.
You know what? I actually just got issue number 4 of Godzilla Goes to Hell. I found the artist edition Zorno cover, and I was kind of shocked at how cool it was. The art was really good. The writing was very interesting also.
I have yet to get to read Godzilla in Hell, because when it comes to the more recent Godzilla comics, I've been wanting to get them in trade as opposed to getting them like individually by issues, because I initially tried that with the first 2 IDW ongoing series and the first 2 Godzilla miniseries, but at that point it became hard to catch up on all of those issues, where it's like I just thought it was a lot more easier to just get the trade paperbacks.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you guys, because you guys made your comic in black and white, and it made things very easy to follow, because if I find like a lot of these, especially the Godzilla comics, looks like they've just puked color onto panels, which is okay. It's okay for a specific art style, but it gets to the point where I'm just like, so many... I'm watching. It's like I'm looking at a picture of the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that's a huge peeve of mine.
Well, that's definitely going to be an issue for you, Adam, if you ever even looked at Godzilla Rulers of Earth, because you have like what, like
I don't want to touch those with a 10-foot pole.
Because you got like 10.
I've seen the artwork, and I'm like, it's okay. I guess I see the appeal in that, but I want to see my stuff. I don't want my eyes to hurt when I'm looking at it. I appreciate the fact that Night of the Fire Beast is in black and white, because I'm like, oh, cool.
Well, we'll try and make the next ones in color that will
full of vibrancy and color enough to make my eyes just melt.
Here's what you do: you make the second issue like in the world of Fire Beast, you make it a 3D movie. So the only colors you're gonna have are red and cyan.
Oh, like seizure-inducing.
Yes. You'll package in like those cheap old school 50s 3D glasses to read the 3D comic. I've seen some comics do that, but they don't work.
No, they don't. The second one will be more in the late 60s, 70s kind of Toho color-ish. Still nothing over the top, just because it's me, and I also don't like colors puked onto comics, especially not shiny colors puked onto comics.
Let's see. I did want to say, what was the experience like for you two coming to or going to G-Fest this year and finally introducing Night of the Fire Beast to the Godzilla Kaiju Tokusatsu fan base / community, and how did it feel like what was like the feedback like and your whole experience for G-Fest 22?
I'll let John handle that one.
Well, for me, it was amazing, because firstly, it was my only second time coming to America, and it was like my first experience of anything close to something like G-Fest. I mean, like Chris had sort of jokingly told me to prepare myself for the level of like raging fandom, but it literally was, however big I thought it was going to be, it was infinitely bigger. But it was great. It was just nice to see so many people just genuinely adoring something and having one weekend where they could just go all out on it. I think it seemed that we had the comic seemed to have a pretty good reception. People were buying it and then coming back the next day and telling us it was really cool. But I think because it was the kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like more of the kind of convention where people were geared more towards the movies and the merchandise. It might have been a better sell at a comic convention than it would have been at G-Fest specifically, but that's not to say, that it didn't go down well, because I think that it did. Most people who bought it seemed to come back and tell us they thought it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with a question for John, being that this was like your first real exposure to like the fan base itself, like being like,
Yeah.
I guess in a way sort of an outsider, how did the fan base felt to you in comparison to the comic fan base that you've interacted with at previous conventions you've attended?
What I liked about it was that it was utterly unpretentious. That's what I liked about it. Everybody was just like balls out, wearing their kaiju fandom and loving every minute of it. You're gonna get people who are like insanely obsessive, and people who come up and tell you facts that you never believed for a minute you were gonna hear. But like, yeah, I mean, it was wicked. It was so cool to see that many people that into things. Like there was a little kid there who'd come over from Ireland with his dad, and he kind of latched onto me a little bit because he was from Britain as well, and his dad had flown him all the way over from Dublin for this one weekend so he could spend all his money on kaiju gear and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was genuinely nice to see, and like everyone who was there, like weirdly you're that far away from home, but you don't feel it when you're in that sort of environment, because everybody's there for the same reason, which is just because they love this one particular thing or this one set of things, and they're just there to like, let themselves explode over it for a weekend. And yeah, it was wicked. It was really cool.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think this experience? Do you think this experience kind of changed your outlook on the giant monster fandom and the giant monster, this subgenre of science fiction? Because I know you mentioned how even though you weren't experienced, you didn't have that much exposure to it. I got the feeling that you've had like this appreciation for the concept of giant monsters. But it's like overall, with all this Fire Beast and G-Fest and interaction with all these new people, how is your like outlook on this subgenre and its fan base? How much has it changed since then?
I mean, it hasn't. It's changed in the sense that I have a greater understanding of it and appreciation of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was never anything that I'm very conscious to not ever sort of be the sort of person that looks down their nose at a genre because they're not into it or they don't understand it. Because if you're into anything,
mm-hmm.
whether it's comics or, giant monster movies or flipping like My Little Pony, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like if you're into one of those things, then you can't really knock people who are into the other ones because everyone's just into their thing and that's how it goes. But I mean, like, I've watched quite a few movies since I've come back, and I still, if I'm in the mood, I'll still stick one on, and I genuinely enjoy them. And I've got the 1950s Godzilla Scream on my phone as a text alert, so that wouldn't still be there if I wasn't enjoying it.
That is definitely really cool.
John got a very intense overnight primer on kaiju movies when he first got here.
Yeah.
Oh,
like-
you gave him
like
the quick
teenage
rundown.
training.
You gave him the quick rundown of like the best and the best, or did you snuck in a little Megalon in there here and there?
What was it? We started watching King Kong Escapes, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
But the 90s Gamera we watched some of.
Nice.
What else was there? I think...
we watched oh god, which Godzilla did we watch? All I can remember is he was fighting something that was flying that wasn't Mothra, but there was more than one antagonist.
GMK.
Son of Godzilla?
No, it was GMK that we watched.
GMK.
The one
Yeah.
with Ghidorah, the three-headed dragon,
Yeah.
Baragon, the red little puppy doggy dinosaur.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's also a great one. Let's see, what was another question I had in mind? Oh yeah, this is a question I asked you in the last recording that I think should be brought up. So, being that you are from the UK, last time I asked you, how popular is Gorgo in its country of origin? Is it like...
No, I mean you'd have to be into that sort of thing to know what it was. It's like quite a lot of my friends are into their horror or their sci-fi to varying extents, but they wouldn't necessarily know Gorgo unless
Mm-hmm.
it's not like a household name or anything.
Right. So I guess
it's not
a UK character like Judge Dredd would be much more well known than Gorgo.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, Gorgo is not to British people what Godzilla is to Americans by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
That's not to say that, people who know it don't think it's cool. I mean, one of the things me and Chris kind of thought about doing was trying to maybe pitch someone a Gorgo reboot as a comic.
That would be awesome.
It would be cool. And I did watch, Gorgo was one of the first films I watched, actually, were in kind of my prep for doing Fire Beast.
Mm-hmm. When you were watching it, it was a little part of you that's like, all right, UK, don't fail me now.
Yeah. I was like, we got to represent in the big giant monster sweepstakes. We did all right. It's not too bad. It's not. I suppose it's not really our thing, is it? We're better at like Hammer horror style stuff.
I guess
or
so.
Literally Hammer horror.
Or comedy in terms of the Cornetto trilogy.
At least it wasn't Reptilicus.
No, yeah. I'll let you know, UK. You did better than what was it? The Denver. I know it's a Danish film. Denmark.
Did better than Denmark.
I'm very sorry for offending you, Denmark. But you didn't do as good as UK.
And freaking Denmark had government aid with that movie. They had the entire Danish army in their pockets. It had the biggest budget of any Denmark movie like ever.
And the best.
And it's crap.
And the best they can come
it's
up.
Garbage.
And the best they can come up with was a flimsy snake puppet.
It's so bad.
Oh, Denmark.
Damn you, Sydney Pink.
So I guess another question I had was, what does the future have in store for Dorugan and the Fire Beast series?
Well, it's funny you should mention that because just the other day, do you want me to tell everyone, Chris, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, we started pitching the series as in the 3 movies when we got back from G-Fest, and it was like picked up and dropped more times than you'd care to pick and something up and then drop it again in the space of about a month. And last week we got picked up by an indie publisher called Insane Comics, who've taken it on to do all 3 of the comics, so that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
And they seem like a nice group. Chris met them yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, they're actually local to me pretty much. So I got to meet them at a small Comic-Con here in Chicagoland, and they're smaller. They're just starting up. I think they started publishing around August, but they have a pretty good business plan, and they're going to take care of a lot of stuff that John and I are not good at. So, and they're willing to do all 3 books and give us, whatever we need, creatively to do it. So, it's a good fit, it seems.
Just wondering, were you ever asked to sign a contract with your blood? Because I think that would have been a really big red flag.
No. Actually, we used dinosaur blood for this one.
Okay.
Goat.
Charred soil.
And do you still have full copyright or ownership of the Dorugan character?
Oh yeah. That's still ours.
Okay, yeah, you wouldn't want to have what happened to the creators of Superman or other well-known comic book characters.
Nope. And
Spider-Man and Sony.
Stan, let's see. Oh yeah, Jack Kirby, he really got the shaft, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know who that is.
We don't want to get Bill fingered.
Oh, poor Bill Finger. Well, you see what happened, Adam, was so there were these 2 individuals who have long been credited as the creators of Batman, Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Bob Kane, he pretty much came up with the name of Batman, and Bill Finger came up with all the major concepts that have been long-standing aspects of the Batman lore. He came up with the costume, came up with the Batcave, the Batmobile. I think he came up with the origin, I believe, and I think he may have come up with the Joker, perhaps.
He did.
Yeah, and so Bob Kane, he pretty much had like very little involvement in the creation of Batman outside of the name itself, but he has been given all the money, all the fame, all the attention, and meanwhile, like Bill Finger kind of, I think he ended up being broke, I believe, while
Yeah,
Bob Kane was,
a pauper. He's in a pauper's, giving a pauper's funeral and everything. Yeah.
yeah, while Bill Finger has, not Bill Finger, while Bob Kane has often been celebrated and is even going to have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame very soon. So it's like Bob Kane was living the life while Bill Finger was screwed over almost more than any other comic book creator.
There's a brilliant little comic strip that puts perfectly how much Bill Finger did versus Bob Kane that says it's Batman without Bill Finger. Mm-hmm. And it's like a guy in red tights with like, you know, the Leonardo da Vinci style wings things, just arrests a random criminal, takes him to a police station and sort of like, is there anyone specific here I should be handing this random criminal over to? And they're like, nope. And he's like, oh, okay, if only I had some sort of vehicle I could leave this random police station in. And if only there was some sort of way you could contact me in the future. So it literally just highlights that everything that is like intrinsically Batman was Bill Finger other than the fucking name.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a beautiful, heartwarming story.
The most heartwarming story about a man who got screwed over.
They've written like there's a guy he's been on some Kevin Smith podcasts who's written a book about it. It's like you know, one day it's going to make a very, very sad film.
Oh, well, that would be interesting to see a film based on the legal struggles of Bill Finger.
No, it's going to be called Shaft. That's what the movie's called too.
The legal struggles of Bill Finger.
It's shot in 4:3 full screen in black and white. And it's going to have the feeling of a 1930s serial film.
And just like with Ed Wood, you'll just have Tim Burton direct this and make it like a period piece.
I just really want to do that with Ishiro Honda. That's all I want to do.
And Johnny Depp is going to play Bill Finger.
Wait, who?
Johnny Depp.
Oh.
Does that mean Helena Bonham Carter is going to be Bob Kane?
Yes.
Yes.
It would be Christopher Lee, but he's dead now.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They have to jazz it up a little bit, you know, because it's
Hollywood. No, we still have the CGI animation from Peter Jackson and The Hobbit, so we can have Christopher Lee in this film. He's just CGI like everybody else in that freaking movie.
I guess so.
And he's 400 feet tall.
for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, just because it'd be awesome.
Sounds epic.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, check out insanecomics.com. Our release date is actually January 15th, I think. Let me check.
Like release date
get
for
to work. Why are you on this podcast? Get to work. God.
Oh, that's the awesome thing is that it's done. So
right, because you have the comic already since like July.
Yeah, so this is the actual like official publisher release date. It is, let's see, January 2016. So there's not an actual day yet, but we'll be announcing that as soon as it comes up.
And you mentioned
and there's James Biggie, who did the cover, who you may know from IDW's Transformers and G.I. Joe. He's actually reworking the cover a little bit for us.
Ooh, okay.
And there might...
The curse strikes again. Damn you, Skynet. He's probably going to disappear very soon. But, so, I guess I can ask you, John. So, the 3 issues are still happening, right?
Yeah. Chris is working on the second one now, which is going to be, I think, the idea is that he's kind of they're going to kind of reverse engineer it in that Chris is going to draw it and then give it to James to write. So the idea being that it's like when the Americans would take the Japanese movies and rather than translate them, just put their own dialogue over it.
Okay.
So that's going to be the second one. And then the third one, which I'll be working on presumably starting this time next year, will be the modern Hollywood reboot.
Okay, so you're still going to do the whole that initial premise with issue 2 being an incarnation of Dorugan similar to 70s era Godzilla, and then the third issue is going to be like a modern day reboot similar to like a combination of Godzilla 2014 and Godzilla 84.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I know Chris has started working on. I think there's like it's like Dorugan versus, I can't remember the name of the monster, brackets the Horror from Outer Space, which is the American title, and then the reboot is penciled in to be called Fire Beast Legacy, and we've already sort of started plotting that in terms of making it a bit bigger in scale, in terms of like page length as much as anything else, but also, you know, we were talking about doing things like putting in, you know, loads of like fake product placement, like big Hollywood
Nice.
and all that stuff. So like, you know, make up your own like drinks and phones and stuff.
Could you have one called Red Sand, the drug of the future?
Is that a reference to something?
If you drop us a line with a reminder, I'm sure we could work it in. Yeah.
You got to do like a what was it? Have you seen the American cut of Godzilla, of Return of Godzilla, called Godzilla 1985, that had the big Dr. Pepper advertisement in the American shot scenes?
I started watching it when I came back from Chicago. I watched about the first half an hour and then I went out, so I didn't finish watching it. So I don't think I caught that bit, but I have seen a bit of it.
Okay, but yeah, I do recommend you check out both the Japanese and American cuts because they're practically two different films. But like the American cut, yeah, because the American cut has a lot of added in American footage with how can I forget his name? He was Raymond Burr, yeah, reprising his role
Raymond
from
Burr
the
is amazing.
yeah, Raymond Burr. Roger Corman asked him to reprise the role that he played in the American version of the first Godzilla movie, and so but all those American scenes is just filled with Dr. Pepper advertisements, where it's just like two individuals are talking, and in the middle of the screen you can just see a big old bright red Dr. Pepper soda vending machine in the middle of...
That's not as good, Andres, as the product placement I've seen on Sayonara Jupiter for McDonald's.
Ooh. Well,
okay, I gotta tell you about this one. It's glorious. It's the most glorious thing you've ever seen. So this guy is calling into the space station, and he's like, "Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later." And then he hangs up, and all of a sudden, this giant Coke and this Big Mac just float up in front of him, and he just takes it and starts drinking it and eating it. I'm like, wow, this, and like the golden arches are just prominent.
You're just expecting like the music.
It's so glorious.
You're just imagining like the little musical thing from the commercials to just pop up out of nowhere. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Well, it looks. I know.
Yeah, I thought it was a commercial at first. I thought that it was a legit commercial at first.
Like you're watching
it actually in the movie.
Like you're watching it on YouTube, and then that's when the advertisement happens in the middle of the video. But it looks like we're kind of running out. I know, John, we are currently running out of time, and it looks like...
yeah, Chris says he can't get back in either.
Right, that's very unfortunate. But I guess this should be the time this would be the appropriate time to wrap things up. So, John, I just want to say, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank
you for having me, and Chris. And thank you for the fantastic trailer you did for Night of the Fire Beast as well. You're the official fourth member of the Fire Beast crew.
I'm incredibly honored to hear that. I mean, it's just a huge honor just to be, involved in this sort of like a giant monster, an original giant monster creator-owned project such as this. So yeah, where can people find you as well as your body of work, John?
Easiest place to find me is on my Twitter thing, which is @chode9mm. And I'm on Facebook just under my normal name. My comic stuff you can find online. There's a thing called the Outre Anthology that I did a few things for, and To End All Wars you can get from Soaring Penguin Press. And I've got a couple of things coming out later in the year, but I don't necessarily know when or where you're going to be able to get them yet, unfortunately.
That's awesome to hear about that. I wish Chris was here, but since he's not, I'll ask him in advance if there's anything for him that he'd like to plug, and he can just give me some links I'll add into the description as well.
He's going to be drawing Dorogan for the next 3 years solid, so I can
just check out yeah, so just check out the for anyone out there, just check out and like the Night of the Fire Beast official Facebook page.
And he's got a Twitter thing now as well, Dorogan. I think it's @GoDoroganGo.
Oh, awesome. And finally, there is the Dorogon website, just Dorogon.com, where you can find the information. And I think you guys still have a couple of leftover issues from G-Fest that you're willing to sell through PayPal?
We do indeed, yeah, and there'll be rarities once it's legitimately published by someone. So yeah.
Nice. And finally, David, since is there anything you want to advertise right now?
I could, but then again, I probably might not meet the date that I promised to upload a certain video, as always.
And let me guess, that's still our top 10 our top 10 or 15 Godzilla movie countdown, isn't it?
Oh no, I was gonna say like an Attack on Titan movie review, but I actually forgot about those.
Well, anyways, no, Adam, he's having also internet difficulties, but I will advertise his latest film that he's currently working on called Which Way They Walk. You can like the Facebook page for that. He's also working on a a fan project called the Godzilla Saga. He also has a Facebook for that. Be sure to like comment, and subscribe to his channel. Adam Noyes. David, he obviously has his own channel, Gorizard. And finally, as for my channel, I recently uploaded my review for the 1994 fantasy action film, Orochi, the Eight-Headed Dragon, and yesterday I was able to successfully pull off my second annual Halloween live stream that I did with Jacob Baker, the Kaiju Maker. You can check, even despite...
What a name.
Oh, it's like a nickname that we ourselves gave to him because he actually creates like full-on like Godzilla-style kaiju suits. And he played Hyper Godzilla in that recent fan film, Godzilla Battle Royale.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he's a really awesome person. And our Halloween live stream last night, was a big success. Despite technical issues where we had to put on a second live stream, we were able to still continue on without a hitch. So we have both parts. They're now pre-recorded and up on YouTube, so you can check that out. So with all that said, oh, hey Adam, I was able to pimp out, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, I was able to pimp out your channel, the Godzilla Saga, and Which Way They Walk. Anything else?
Do also check out, if you so wish, Shiro Honda-thon, which is where I went through every single one of Ishiro Honda's movies available to us on DVD. And I've recently did the grand finale, which was a full-length feature commentary for the War of the Gargantuas. So do check those out as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I actually watched War of the Gargantuas with your commentary in celebration as part of like my little Halloween giant monster movie marathon.
Aww.
So with all that said, thank you everybody for joining us for another episode of the Shoe Watch Podcast. A final thank you to both Christopher Martinez and Jonathan Claude. Definitely check out the Night of the Fire Beast comic once it's officially released, or you can check out whatever issues remain through their website at Dorogon.com. So with all that said, I have been your host, Andres Perez, a.k.a. Kaiju Noir.
I am Gorizard.
And I'm Noise of AN Productions.
And I've been Jonathan Claude and sort of Chris Martinez.
And until next time, everybody, take care.